Hello, and welcome to the Prairie Fibre Witch podcast. This is episode 8. I'm your host, Sarah. You can find me on Instagram as Prairie Fibre Witch or on Ravelry as Jane Mumbles. And I just wanted to spend a little time at the beginning here to talk about my thoughts on yarn accessibility, or knitting accessibility, yarn affordability, yarn substituting, and a little bit like my personal stance on it. I am a self-taught knitter. I taught myself to knit basically from whatever patterns I could find that my mom had lying around when I was a kid. And I didn't know about wool until I was in university and discovered that yarn stores existed. For me, if I was actually going to buy yarn, it would be at, they had these little craft stores in malls called Lewis Craft here in Canada that just had like a smattering of different kind of craft activities and materials available for them, including like good old, Patton's acrylic yarn. So mostly what I grew up knitting with acrylic yarn and working on patterns that called for acrylic yarn. And I never had the yarns called for necessarily in a specific pattern, simply because I was working from a stash that my mom had collected from various sales here and there, and so I was always substituting yarn. So for me, it's sort of, it's very rare for me to knit from something that's actually called for in a pattern. I am very comfortable substituting yarns. But like, having worked in a yarn store, this is not something that is necessarily very usual, or that's something that a lot of people just know how to do. And it's not necessarily obvious, especially you have to sort of, I know for me, if it's a yarn that I'm not aware of, I spend a lot of time like trying to research the yarn, find information about it online and what their characteristics are. So it involves some detective work. But I don't find that to be such a hard-won skill that I wouldn't want to share that ability and information with others. So I kind of think that I think it would be nice if people shared this sort of information more. And I don't think it's too much to ask It's not too much to ask for a designer to give some vague characteristics of the yarn that they're asking for. I mean, if we look at sewing patterns, it's very rare for you to be able to find the exact fabric that a pattern is made in, and so they always describe what kind of fabric you need to find, like a lightweight rayon, what kind of things would be suitable, lightweight cottons, linens, those sorts of things. There's always that kind of description. And also, also these days with indie pattern designers, even if they're selling kits in to make whatever it looks like in the picture, they still give you those fabric characteristics of what to look for in a fabric. So, I mean, I don't know that a designer needs to give an exhaustive list of every yarn that is possible to make a specific project, and that's also going to be a capsule in time because yarns come and go, dyers come and go. Your big yarn companies discontinue yarns too, but like, giving a little list of like, say, 5 different kinds of yarn that would work for that pattern, not necessarily brand names, but like what kind of characteristics to look for, maybe some fiber content information, that I think would go a long way to help people start learning about yarns. And I think for me personally, I'm going to try and talk a bit more about why I chose the yarns that I chose for a specific project. Yeah. Hi, I just wanted to add a little note about if you are wondering about substituting a yarn for a pattern and you want some help with that, I'd be happy to help. You can contact me or leave it as a comment or something. And another of people have been linking to yarnsub.com or referencing Clara Park's book, The Book of Yarn, I think it's called, which are definitely good resources to look at when trying to substitute for yarns. The thing with YarnSub, though, that I find is it really tries to find a yarn that is nearly identical to what you're searching for. So that's when, like, a lot of patterns could be worked in a number of different kinds of yarn. So and I'm not sure, it's been a while since I tried using it. I'm not sure how if it gives you like different price points for different options, or just tries to find you something that's the closest to what you're searching for. So, I mean, it's definitely a great resource to find information about like discontinued yarns, especially. And otherwise, yeah. That's where your local yarn store can be helpful, or yeah, like I say, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to give my opinion. I am totally Elisa Simpson, and so like to share the knowledge, all the knowledge I have in my little head. Yeah, thanks. If you do disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. If you want to talk about it in the comments, I'm up for that. Yeah, other than that, yes, it's been a little while since my last video, and it's just been a busy summer. I take summer classes online, obviously, at these times. We're still in a pandemic. And my summer term is just about over. One of my classes has finished, which I loved deeply. I took a history of books class, which is like I feel it's a very book nerdy thing to take, to be talking about, like, you know, the origins of writing and cuneiform tablets, and then medieval manuscripts, and talking about the marginalia that shows up there, and yeah, I really enjoyed the class. And I think part of it, what really helped, was the woman who taught the class has a wonderful Irish accent. She's Irish, worked for Trinity College for many years, is very knowledgeable on the topic, and I really enjoyed, this was the first class that I've had that had really long lectures, and I really enjoyed that. I like a good long lecture from somebody who is enthusiastic about what they are talking about, which was, I mean, yeah. So this hit all of those boxes. I loved those classes during my undergrad, and yeah, still love them. And I realized that in my last video, I forgot to show you my finished rug that I made when I was in Mexico. The second rug. The first rug I showed you, but I didn't show you the second rug, which I was a little bit not sure if I was going to be able to finish it in time for us to leave, but I managed to get it done. And this is, this pattern is considered an advanced weaving pattern because the pattern changes on every single row, and so you have to understand the logic of how the shapes are changing and be cognizant of what you're doing on every row throughout the pattern. So it took a lot more concentration, and the professor for this class, or the weaving professor, told me that after about 3 repeats I'll start to understand what I was doing, and that was pretty accurate. And you can see that, like, there's a color change at this point of the rug. About right there, that I didn't have enough of this purple color to finish even this motif, so I added in this other color, which I had enough, there was tons of, to be able to finish this piece. And I kind of like that it has that color shift in it. I think it's more interesting than if it were all in one color, really. And yeah, it's not what I would have chosen to do, but having to react to the realities of the materials that I was working with. I mean, there was more of this color available, but it was a different dye lot, and so I chose to go with a color that was a little bit more off than just the dye lot change, so that it would be more obvious, and I really enjoy how it turned out. And I've got this set up beside my bed. Yes, I changed the view a little bit. I'm gonna try and see if we can get some better lighting, because I feel like it's hard sometimes to see the colors accurately. So we're gonna try this setup, see how it goes, see if it's any better. This is my desk with, you know, stuff on it. This is my corner where I do schoolwork. So although, you know, yarn and craft supplies do kind of pile up here too, because as I've mentioned before, I knit and read when I'm working on school readings. So let's move on to some things that I finished. And though I've been playing Animal Crossing, it's been enough time that I've also accumulated a lot of finished projects. I've been knitting a lot of socks. I've been doing some cross stitch and playing Animal Crossing. So here we go. My first finished piece is this cross stitch moth that I was working on. This pattern is called HL's Moth by Kathy Barrick. And I I didn't crochet it either. I cross stitched it. I stitched it using the called for silks on the called for fabric. So these are all Needlepoint Silks, as listed in the pattern. And I didn't find it easy to do. This is on 40 count linen, which is very, very tiny. And at the beginning, I wasn't so sure if I liked the tiny stitches, but now that I've finished it, I am really into it. I am into some tiny, seriously tiny stitches. I'm into it. And as I mentioned before, I chose to put my initials rather than HL. Simply, I find that a weird thing to be making work with somebody else's initials on it. So I put mine. And I just found an alphabet online and sort of adapted it to try and mimic the look of the original letters that are in the pattern. And then I add my little 2020 signature or date on there, because you should sign and date your work. I think it was Michelle of the Striped Rose said that in one of her early videos, that her mom told her that she should always sign her work, and I've taken that to heart, and now I sign everything. Sign and date. What else do I have here? I have a whole smattering of stuff. I guess I can kind of go in some sort of order. These are my un-Christmas socks. I will call them that now. This was supposed to be Christmas yarn, and I originally thought that I was going to knit these as a gift for someone, but then as I was knitting up the leg, I realized how cool the pattern was in this yarn. This is Regia candy color, I think. And the colorway name is Gluhwein. The information, the color number information and names will be in the description box. I always try to include detailed information about that sort of thing, and links to the Ravelry project pages for everything, so you can find them, you know, in the doobly-doo, as some people call it. So I am really happy with these socks. I have worn these socks and washed these socks, and they are un-Christmas socks, so they just go in my sock drawer. I can't remember when I finished them. I got into just like finishing a bunch of socks, and I think it mostly worked. I think this might have been I think I finished the pair, or thought I had finished the pair, but I hadn't knit one of the second sock to be long enough to actually fit my foot, so I had to go back and like add some length to it, which is something that I have done again on a sock that I'm working on now, which I will tell you about in a bit. Next pair of socks. My brother, when he last came to visit us at Thanksgiving, brought with him a bunch of sock yarn that he had in his stash. He's a knitter too, or he was a knitter. I don't know that he would really call himself a knitter now. I don't know. He used to teach knitting at a yarn store in Montreal. And when he left that job, he kind of stopped knitting in a big way. And I don't know that he does much now, but he still has his stash. And when I started knitting and giving him socks, he was like, well, don't buy yarn for that because I have a bunch. So he brought me some. So this is the first pair of socks that I've made from that stash that he brought me. I don't know the colorway number because I didn't have the yarn label. This is Trekking XXL, I believe. It was pre-wound into two 50-gram cakes. I did not knit two at a time. I knit one at a time, but these are the socks, and I have his foot measurements. For him, so the mechanics of a sock are you have your stitch count, and then when you get to your heel, you're working on half the stitches. And then the depth of the heel is usually half, like a quarter of the total number of stitches, in terms of like the slip stitches at the side. So the back and forth. I'm not explaining that correctly. Anyway, but for him, he has a little high instep. So what I've started doing for him and my mom is to do 2 more back and forths. So it'll accumulate 2 more slip stitches along the side of the heel, which will also increase the number of decreases you do over the instep, which just gives a little bit more space in this entire area. So that's something that I do. And I mean, Trekking XXL and Regia are both good commercial sock yarns. So they are sort of superwash yarn, somewhat tightly spun, blended with nylon, and built to be knit at a nice gauge. And I've started experimenting with my gauge a little bit and knitting at, I'm not sure if like my gauge has loosened up or just I want a firmer fabric than before. So I've actually gotten some 1.75 millimeter needles that I've started using. I think these ones were both knit on 2 millimeter needles. Again, the information will be below. And I think I knit them both on 2 millimeter needles, but I'm kind of going on a case-by-case basis on how things are working up. Next, I worked on another pair of socks for me out of some nice hand dyed yarn that I got at I think a winter update. This yarn is by a dyer here in Alberta, Tiny Human Knits. And this is her Hoarfrost colorway. And what she's doing that's interesting is she's selling in 50-gram skeins, so which is enough for like a nice sock. I have a little bit. I have some left over, so these could have been taller socks if I wanted, but I I don't like really tall socks. I like shorter socks. So, I like this length. And for the contrast, I used some leftover Ocean by the Sea yarn that I had used to make another pair of socks earlier this year. And I think the combo is really nice. My mom really loved these socks as I was knitting them and has decided that she is no longer gonna come up with color combinations herself, and she really just wants me. She's just decided that she wants to grab whatever she likes that I've knit. That's not necessarily actually gonna happen, but it's negotiable. And these were, oh man, they're like, I've knit so many pairs of socks that I don't remember all the details on this. I think this is a 64 stitch, and I feel like it's probably on a 2mm needle. And I've been switching back and forth between my DPNs and Magic Loop. I found DPNs that I like that I won't snap, which are the Carbons needles. I prefer to knit on wood, to knit with wood needles, but at sock sizes and like especially trying to do tighter gauges, I have broken needles, I have broken bamboo needles. I don't want to break my really expensive cute sock needles. So I decided to try the Carbons because they're not the cheapest, but they're also not super expensive. And though the joins, they have like a carbon fiber body of the needle, which has a great texture to it. It's not as slick as metal, and it's not super sticky either. And then the metal tips, sometimes where the metal tip joins with the body of the needle, there can be a little bit of a snag potential there. It's less on the smaller sizes than the larger sizes, but so it's still really nice. So these might have been knit on DPNs, I don't remember. Yeah. So it's nice. I like both of these kinds of yarns. You can't go wrong with commercial sock yarn, which you can find, I feel ranges from like $12 to $17, depending on the company and where you're getting it from, at least here in Canada. And then it's also nice to knit with more premium hand-dyed yarns as well. And, your feet, they can't really tell the difference. Certainly the beautiful soft yarns are beautiful and soft, but I find my feet are not so sensitive that they find a difference between those two. And let's see, more socks. I have made more socks. One thing that I've been doing that we've kept up for a few months now with my friends back in Montreal is we've been having weekly Zoom meetings. And a few of my friends are also knitters. And we got into a conversation about like old sock projects. And my one friend was saying that she used to take skeins of like 100-gram skeins of Noro sock yarn, and she would just stripe it from either end of the ball, and then she would end up making 3 socks, and then wear combinations of those 3 socks until they just wore out and died. So another friend of mine and I got excited about that, and I was like, well, hey, I happen to have in my stash 2 skeins of Noro Taiyo sock yarn, which I had earmarked I had bought them to make a cowl many years ago, but clearly that hasn't happened. I'll send you a skein, and then we can have like a little knit along. And that's what we did. I wound both skeins into cakes. I mean, they were in balls, but the Noro is kind of twists around itself, so it was probably good to rewind it. And then, yeah, these are my socks that I made. They've been worn on my feet, which is where they go. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. And we were like trying to keep pace with each other and be like, okay, I've knit this much of the sock, where are you? And my friend considers herself like not a fast knitter, but I had to keep up with her on these socks. And I only got to catch up because she went back and reknit. She went back to her heel and added some more rows to give herself some more depth. So, that's the only way that I caught up with her. And then she lapped me again. So, I don't think she's a slow knitter. If you're watching this, Janina, you're not a slow knitter. Yeah. So, these... Now, the Noro sock yarns are, they're more like a sport weight than fingering weight. So, these ones I actually knit. But again, because I'm sort of... They have a high cotton content, and also I'm trying to knit at better gauges. So I actually knit these on a 2.25 millimeter needle. I started them on 2.5s that's recommended on the ball band, but it was just too loose for my tastes. So that's those socks. Now, I've been watching the Woolly Mammoth Fibre Company podcast for a little while now, and I really love her yarns, and so I might be also following her on Instagram, and she does put countdowns for when her updates go. So my stash list 2020 has kind of gone out the window, and I bought some sock yarn from one of her updates. And when it came, I immediately cast on for socks. And I wasn't sure. My mom also really loved the sock yarn. And so I decided like I was going to knit up the entire skein and use as much of it as possible for socks. So, the first pair, they were both going to be shorty socks. And the first pair, I decided as I was knitting them that they were going to be for her. Fortunately, my mom and my brother and I always work the same stitch count circumference, so I can make those kinds of decisions. All I have to do is make that decision by the time I'm working on the length of the foot, or like around the heel area, because my mom and my brother both need a little bit more room in the heel. And so these ones I actually broke out my 1.75 millimeter needles for, which I knit these magic loop, and I knit them a little bit more recently so I remember some of the details. And I always like to do a tubular cast on for my socks. I like a 1x1 rib. I usually do more rib than this. I usually do 20 rows, but for a shorty sock, I thought this was a nice proportion. I think it's about 15 rows of ribbing. Yeah, heel flap and gusset. Regular wedge toe. And yeah, this yarn is so nice to knit with, and I think it turned out really gorgeous. I am a fan. I like it. If you're in the market for that kind of, for her price point, it doesn't come fast because she's in Northern Ireland. So to get to Canada is usually like, well, also with the pandemic, like shipping has, shipping from anywhere takes a whole lot longer. Like things are taking a month to come from the States where sometimes they were taking a week. Oh, I forgot to tell you about something else that I finished. This is my tank that I knit. Oh, I can't remember now which is the front and which is the back. This is the Sol tank by Jacqueline Cieslak, and it's been all folded up, which is why it's got the wrinkles. This is kind of how it looks. I have some pictures of me wearing it that I can include. And I finished this, and I really enjoyed knitting it. I was like, usually I'm an enthusiastic test knitter, and I knit fairly quickly. But for this one, I was kind of lagging behind because I was still really into Animal Crossing at the time and not really feeling like knitting. I thought having a deadline would make me like get back into it, but that just took a little bit longer. Though I'm back there now. Maybe I'll show you the side that's a little less wrinkly. No, that one's also just as wrinkly. And I did not knit in the called for yarn for this project, mostly because I didn't think it would come in time for me to be able to. There was a tight turnaround for this project. So I had ordered from Sweet Georgia Yarns, which is here in Canada. They're out of Vancouver. And this particular yarn is a 65% silk and 35% linen, so not an inexpensive yarn. But it only required 2 skeins of it, and actually I barely used the second skein. So, though this is an expensive yarn, it's not necessarily an expensive garment because of how much yardage you get in each skein. These skeins are 115 grams, so 4 ounces, and you get 480 yards. And also, like, a tank top or a tee is a good way to sort of knit with something a little bit more luxurious. I mean, if depending on your financial situation, of course, but like, you're going to use less yardage on a tee or a tank top, or like this one I knit the cropped length, so it's not going to take as much yarn as like a full sweater. So that would be, if I were in considering like where to splurge, I didn't feel so bad using a more expensive yarn for this project because I knew it wasn't gonna, like, it was only gonna take 2 skeins, and that's manageable for me. But I mean, this pattern I think would be nice out of a cotton. It would be nice out of bamboo. I know I used to find bamboo like at Michael's. Cotton, bamboo, linen if you could find it, but I don't know that they necessarily make budget linen yarns. I feel like the Lindy chain, I'm not sure if they have a fingering weight from Knit Picks, I think would be interesting too. I mean, I like the sheen of this, which is something that you get with silk, but you can also get that with bamboo. It has a similar texture because the bamboo that gets made through the rayon process, rayon was designed to mimic the way that silk is produced in animals, or like in silk moths, what the chemical reaction is. So I feel like it's a good, it's not necessarily as shiny, but it can, or even a mercerized cotton, the mercerization process also makes the cotton more shiny. So if you want that kind of sparkle, those are some things to consider. Okay, wait, did I talk about the details about what needles I used and like what size and everything are in the show notes? I don't remember the details off the top of my head. I don't think you need to watch me like read my show notes. Okay, so back to socks. This is my part of my second pair of socks that I made out of the Woolly Mammoth yarn that I got. And I had also ordered some mini skeins from her, and I used one of them to do the contrasting heels and toes. For this, I really wanted to maximize my yarn usage. So I actually knit these toe up, which is rare for me to do. But, I mean, that's the best way to make sure that you're going to use all of your yarn, is to do that. Although, I also did an afterthought heel. So if you're doing an afterthought heel, you could also, with a contrasting toe, you could just knit top down in the tube until you run out of yarn and then start the toe. So I suppose if with afterthought you could go either way. But I still started toe up, and I actually finished these socks. And because even experienced knitters make mistakes, when I was knitting the second sock, I found when I finished, I had marked where my spot was for the heel and then counted all my rows. I thought I had counted properly based on what I had done for the first sock, for the second sock, and but somehow I had this like little mini ball of yarn left over, and I was like, well, that's strange. I guess I didn't measure it in half properly, and I didn't really think about it. And then I went in and cut in my heels and added them in and wove in all the ends, and then I even tried it on my foot and was like, huh, this is kind of tight. And then it wasn't until I was laying them out to take the final pictures to put on Ravelry that I realized that the feet were 2 different lengths. And so you can see I am in the middle of repairing, like fixing my mistake. So basically I was like, oh, shit. Yes, shit. God damn it. What the fuck? I cut in my heel. This is a true afterthought heel sock. So I actually cut my knitting. And what the hell am I going to do? There's a goddamn hole in my sock where my heel should be. How am I going to fix that? And then as I was thinking about it, I was like, you know, if I had used waste yarn, there would just be a hole without anything to fix it, right? So at least with the cut in heel, I have taken out a row, and then when I go back to graft it back together, I'll be adding that row back. But if I had done waste yarn, I would just be having to add an extra row in there. And so like that, I mean, this, I feel like it would still add a weak point, because there'd be more rows on the front or more rows on one side than there where the heel should be than there would be on the other, so that there would just be a weakness there. Especially if these were striped socks, then one of the stripes would have more stripes on one side than the other. So though I thought this was like a big, huge problem, I think it's actually the better way to have done this and even with, though I mean, I wish I would have just measured the sock properly a few times before I actually cut in the heel. But you know, sometimes you gotta make mistakes to figure out how to fix them. And I mean, that kind of ups your game a little bit. So it took me a little bit to make sure that, I think I've got it, at the sides here, that the graft connects in properly to the rest of the knitting. And because I had woven in my ends, I didn't have enough. I mean, I wouldn't have enough to do the whole thing from the tails, but I really didn't have enough because I cut it. So I thankfully had this, like, all that was left over from my first sock was probably like 30 inches of yarn or something. I used that to graft with, because this is going to need to be used to make the sock the same length as the other one. So that's where I am right now. And I've counted my rows, and believe you me, I will be counting about 7 more times to make sure that I have it right before I cut again. And yeah. So these are my Whoops oak socks now. Yeah, so I mean, well, not that I'm the best knitter, but like, even those of us who've been knitting for a long time, we make mistakes and then have to fix them. And sometimes I like to do the complicated way of fixing things rather than the easier way, because I know how to do it, and then I feel like I can be smug about my knitting skills or whatever. Okay, more socks. You've seen these socks before. They have grown since you have seen them last. Although they really should reasonably be finished. I mean, considering the stack of socks that I have been showing you, yeah, these really should be finished by now. But they're not. They're here. These are my mom's lollipop wood socks, and it took me a little bit to get used to where the proper counts for all of the cables. So I've got this little weenie cable at the top here, which I'm going to have to mimic on the second sock, I think. Otherwise, not that anybody will care, my mom won't care, but I care. So I'm going to do it. And yeah, this is out of some very nice sock yarn from Hello Yarn. Information again, doobly-doo. And I really enjoy it. It's very nice. I am knitting these on 2mm needles, US size 0. And as you can see, magic loop. So they'll get finished at some point. That's kind of my attitude right now. I did not sign up for Stash Dash this year. And though I am tracking my yardage, I'm not putting any pressure on myself to like finish projects, or at least not yet, simply because, you know, there was a point where earlier this, even a few months ago, where I didn't really feel like knitting at all. So I feel like putting obligations and pressure on myself to finish things is not the way to go. That's only going to make me want to not do anything at all. And play more Animal Crossing, probably. Or, you know, just cross-stitch a whole bunch. Okay, other things that I am doing. I personally like using as much of a skein of yarn, especially sock yarn, as I can. So I am making what I'm calling tube socks. So I am, at the moment, using the leftovers from my skein of Noro, and I am knitting a sock tube. I know this is a construction method that people usually do with a circular sock machine when they're getting used to how it works. I don't have a circular sock machine, and I don't really intend on buying one for any specific reason. So I'm just knitting a tube, a stripey tube, which makes it stripes. For me, always make things more interesting. Stripes have been something that I have been knitting, like, one of the main things I used to knit when I was a kid was I would knit mittens for myself. And when I figured out stripes, I was like, oh, everything should be striped, and coming up with great stripe combinations. And as you can see, I'm wearing a stripy shirt, and I have lots of stripy shirts or stripy garments in my life. So stripes and polka dots I enjoy. And especially with knitting, if I can make it stripy. I like striping sock yarn. Self-striping is great, but I also like just striping. And what I always carry my yarns. Here, can I show you? Always carry my yarns up the side. Can you even, yeah, you can kind of see that. And so I have a rhythm. My preferences are for a 4-row stripe. That's an ideal proportion for me. And so I just, you know, as I'm knitting, I work the tail. I'll just switch it back and forth from what my working yarn is doing until it's time to change. So it's a little bit of activity to do at the beginning of the round, which makes it a little bit of interest, so that knitting a stockinette tube is not boring. Well, I don't think it's boring. I like stripes. And especially like knitting with something like this. I mean, there are those unique sock yarns that are dyed to do this so that you don't have to stripe your yarns. But I mean, I don't think stripes are such a pain that I'm willing to do this just with Noro. And, okay. Noro is an affordable yarn for the most part. I mean, these skeins, the sock yarn skeins, are a little bit more pricey. I mean, but also compared to hand-dyed sock yarns, they're not expensive. Like, this price tag is still on here from when I bought it, and it was, so $20 Canadian. But that's for 100 gram skein, which I clearly can get 2 pairs of socks out of. So that works out to about $10 per pair of socks. So that's not bad. And most 100 gram skeins I can get 2 pairs of socks out of, because I have small feet and I enjoy shorty socks. Or like the leftover, I find there's always a leftover bit. You could save those up and do scrappy socks. There's an entire group on Ravelry called Monster Socks that is devoted to making scrappy socks and using up your leftovers. And there's like lots of different sort of striping patterns that people use, or blending patterns, to try and make them flow, or like integrate the colors a little bit more. And the socks are all gorgeous that people post in that group. So I would, if you're on Ravelry and able to access it, I would recommend you check it out. We'll have a little cross stitch break because when I finished that moth, I started another one. I started another cross stitch. I didn't start another moth, clearly. This is the Chill Vibes Only pattern by Junebug and Darlin. I did not buy a kit. Simply, her kits are lovely. I just have a preference to stitch on linen instead of Aida cloth. I like how it looks better. And again, this is on 40 count fabric, so those are some tiny stitches, which really pleases me. Now you have to keep in mind, if you are going to change the stitch count of what you're stitching on, it will change the finished size of your piece. So kind of like how you can adapt the gauge, how you can change gauge for in a project, you can do the same kind of calculations to figure out how big it'll be. And if you're curious about it, I'll see if I can find some, mention it in the comments, and I'll see if I can find somewhere online that explains it, or try and explain it myself. Not that I necessarily state things clearly all the time. So this particular, so I decided, I got some different linens. I wasn't sure about colors because I can't go to a store at the moment, so you can't see things in person. So I ordered a couple different, like 2 different pieces of linen, and then ended up deciding on this piece, which is a 40 count Attic lace from Lakeside Linens. And if I'm going to recommend a place for you to order from, I would recommend, there's a store in Calgary called Traditional Stitches that has a lot of really nice materials to order from. Like they have, you know, anything that I have seen on 123 Stitch, I have also seen at Traditional Stitches. So I try to order from them, because then it's, I mean, it comes faster, but also, and there's no customs, but also supporting the local industry. Although they are swamped at the moment, and so it's taking them a few weeks to get to orders, and there are shortages on fabrics and flosses at the moment. So don't be in a hurry to get what you're after. So I had sent in an order, I think, a month and a half ago, and they sent me part of it because I was ordering things that I knew that they didn't have in stock anyway. So I was like, just take your time. When it's in, but I'd like these at some point. So yeah, because stitchers have been ordering things. Like me, I am also a stitcher, I guess, because I like always have a project on the go now. And I was working on this and I put it down for a little bit, and then I got my order in which I had decided to try out these Q-snap frames. I've seen them. I know people rave about them, and I don't know, wasn't in the mood before to try them. I've been stitching with like this little 4-inch hoop, which apparently it's recommended that you use a smaller hoop size so that you're moving it more frequently rather than getting the folds really impregnated into the fabric. But now that I have the Q-snap, I see why people go crazy about them. And I have been stitching it a lot. And I like, you know, as soon as I got this, I think last week, and so I finished up this whole bottom corner. I have a whole page done on this pattern. It's on 4 pages. So this whole page is done, and I'm cruising to get this one finished. Although there's a third, I mean, the chill has to go up here, right? So I'm going to do as much as I can up here and then move the frame. I do not have a magic grime guard, so I'm trying to just hold the plastic bits rather than put my hands on the fabric. And you can see I've folded up the fabric a bit so that it's easy, like it's easier having it all bunched up to be able to just reach back and forth. And I think that's the part that I like the most, is that you don't have to like go around the fabric to get to the back, to pull up from the front, to go to the back, to like go around the fabric again. So it's a little bit more immediate. So that's where we're at with that. And yes, I'm using the colors that she had in her original pattern. She also Junebug and Darlin. I'm not sure what her actual name is. She also recently released a pattern and kit that says Maker, that is in a similar style to this, but different colors. So I have some DMC on my outstanding order to do that, and I got some linen that I think I'm going to use for that when I'm done with this. Because I now I have a hoop and a Q-snap, so I suppose I could have 2 projects going at once. But I feel like since it's sort of an auxiliary craft, that I should really just only have one going at once. I don't like accumulating lots of unfinished things. They accumulate anyway, so I don't need to go crazy with that. And I haven't really been working on this recently, but I thought I'd show it because I'm pretty sure it's much further along from the last time I showed it. And for a while, I was working on this exclusively as my reading and knitting, but as you can see, I've switched back to socks for the meantime. And this is my Stockbridge cardigan, which sorry, this is just, should I just crumple it up like this and show it to you? Is that better? This is the Stockbridge cardigan that I've been working on for a bit now. I mean, I started it in Mexico, before Mexico? I don't remember. Pretty sure it was this year though. So this is pretty good progress. And I have that much of the second sleeve done. And yeah, I'll pick it up again. It's just been hanging out on this part of my desk over here, so it'll get picked up at some point and finished. Again, I'm trying not to put pressure on myself to do those things. And lastly, my most recent cast on, which I did just this week because I got some gorgeous yarn. My mom also follows some yarn dyers on Instagram. So sometimes it happens that she sees something that she really likes, and it's something that I also usually like, and so I sometimes order it. And that includes, this is a skein of La Bien-Aimée Cash Merino, and I mean, yeah, this is from the new Mizuyaki collection that she's working on. This is the Howl and Sophie. And her Cash Merino is amazing. Like, some Cash Merinos, it doesn't really feel that different to me from a regular superwash sock yarn. But this one is quite soft. So, if you're in the market to splurge, you can't go wrong with this. And I love the new colors that she's developing for this Mizuyaki collection. I didn't get the Cash Merino myself. I got, I think, the Merino Twist base. And so I have one of each of these colors. I feel like I'm going to use all my speckly colors to maybe do a Vertices Unite or something. You know, a Stephen West, or like maybe save it for the next West Knits Mystery Knit Along. I don't know, we'll see. And I also felt like doing some really complicated brioche for some reason. So we've got some 2-color brioche going on here. This is the Rebel 2 shawl by Leslie Ann Robinson. And, oh, this other skein of yarn is Junk Yarn. What does she call it? I think it's Smooth Sock in the Madame Leota colorway. It's this lovely bluey purple that, I don't know if it catches it on camera, but it kind of glows in real life, which I think stands up nicely with the fluorescents that are in the Howl and Sophie. And there are some purpley blue speckledy bits in here. You can kind of see maybe there. So, and I have started the shawl twice, and I'm going to start it a third time because we've been playing with what yarn should be the main color and what yarn should be the contrasting color. Which brioche side do you like better? So I started with this side, and then I made some mistakes and decided to start over. And then I think I was about here when I did that. And then I was looking at it, and then I looked at the other side, and I took some pictures of it. And I was like, I don't know. And my mom looked at it, and she's like, I don't know. And I showed it to a friend of mine, and she was like, probably this side. And then I was like, yeah, maybe. And so then I tried this side anyway. And I think, I mean, on camera, it's more clear that this is the winner. But in person, this one also kind of seems like a winner. So, I mean, it's not a reversible shawl simply because there are these, I mean, there are these motifs that are, like where the decreases and stuff are, don't show up the same way on the back as they do on the front. So there is a clear directionality. But, like, yeah. I mean, my mom, she wears shawls backwards and forwards and doesn't really care. So, not that, I mean, she does care, but she doesn't always notice. And, yeah, so we're gonna start a third time, which I don't mind. I've really memorized what this section of the shawl is doing, the chart that goes with it, so, and this is only like, this is what I knit yesterday on this, so it's not so much of a loss. Fortunately, we've been watching things on TV that are in English, so I don't have to try and read subtitles at the same time. which when knitting brioche is not really possible, for me at least. I'm experienced with brioche, but I wouldn't consider myself a brioche wizard. And yeah, so we're gonna start a third time with this side. Throw me a thumbs up if you like that idea. Yeah, that's all my knitting right now. So, lots of socks. Lots of socks. I am a fan of socks, so using that as a way to remotivate myself, to re-excite myself about knitting. Yeah, knit all the socks, man. You can always use more socks. And if you don't need the socks, somebody in your life could use some socks. That's my philosophy anyway. You don't have to knit stuff for the people in your life if you don't want to. That's your own decision. What books have I been reading? This one I'm going to consult notes because it's been a little bit. So last time I was reading 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami, and I loved that book. It was so good. I finished it in time to return to the library, in time for like the due date on my ebook, and I really enjoyed the book, and it ends satisfyingly, and his books are like kind of quirky and weird. Like they've got a little magical realism sort of sci-fi element to them, but it's like just a little bit. It's not like, a whole world with different politics and everything. It's like it mostly resembles, worlds on Earth. And there's just a little strangeness in there. And like the strangeness kind of starts at the beginning, but like it's not as noticeable and it just gets a little stranger, and not everything gets explained necessarily, but it's not necessary that it does. And yeah, I'm here for it. He has more books that I should read. I have read other of his books, which I also enjoyed, and if you like his books and you haven't read 1Q84, I recommend it. And the next book that I read, I don't want to sound like a jerk when I say this, but like after reading an intense piece of literature, then going to something that's like, not poorly written necessarily, but like in a different area. I don't know how to say this without sounding like a jerk, but like the next book that I read wasn't in the same vein, I guess, as 1Q84, as the Murakami book, and like the tonal difference. It's kind of it's a mystery, right? But with magic in it. Okay, so the book is called Magic for Liars by Sarah Gailey, and it's a very well written book, and I enjoyed it. It's just not trying to be the same thing as the Murakami book, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's kind of like it's this murder mystery that happens in a magic high school, and the person who we're following, so it's sort of detective story with magic and family baggage. I think that's a good description of it without getting into it. Well, without giving you spoilery details. And after, I think it was just like the come down off of the Murakami book. Maybe I should have just like not read anything for a couple days and then started something. Maybe that's a better thing to do than to just go right into another book. It's maybe more fair to do that. But yeah, the books that I've been reading since Murakami, I've had a little like not quite feeling them. Nothing to do, like the books are perfectly fine. It's just sometimes you need the right book at the right moment. And I just haven't, I had that book and I just haven't found the next one that's like that. So next I read Magic for Liars, which was a very good story and turned out to be quite good, and I'm glad I stuck with it. And then I read Unashamed, Musings of a Fat Black Muslim by Leah Vernon, which was a very interesting read. It's basically a memoir, and yeah, and interesting to get a different perspective in somebody else's experiences, which are not experiences that I've had as a middle-class white woman. And the last book that I read, I actually gave up on. My mom and I, was it last week or the week before, were just like, I was telling her, I think it was a Wednesday, and I said to her, you know, I'm really just not digging the book that I'm reading right now. And she was like, oh my God, same. And so I declared amnesty for giving up on books that day. And I made a little Instagram post about it. So if you're in a place where you're reading a book and you're not feeling it, you totally have my approval to abandon it. And on my Goodreads, I do actually have a list of books that I have abandoned. And there are some books that are just hanging out in my, like, currently reading that have been there for years. And I think last year I finally moved a bunch to the abandoned list because, you know, you start reading a book, or I start reading a book, and then I have to take it back to the library, and then I just never take it out again, and then after a few years, it's gonzo. So, I mean, I also have, like, you can see at my bedside table, there's a tower of books there, and some of the ones at the bottom have been read a little bit, but they're just living there right now in the waiting to be abandoned. Maybe I'll get back to them, maybe I won't. I guess reading books is like my attitude on whips. You gotta follow your pleasure there. No pressures. So I gave up on this book. This book is called Queenie by Candace Carty-Williams. And I heard about it because Susan of the Knit Lib podcast read it. And I think I recommended it. So I messaged her on Instagram when I was considering abandoning it, and it being like, because it's just kind of like a descent, this character's descent into, well, not into anything, just like low self-esteem and maybe a depression or something. And I just couldn't, not that there's anything, like, the character was really interesting, it's just the stuff that she was doing, I was just like, what's going on? I'm not into this. Like, what? She's making all these, like, terrible decisions and having sexual encounters with, like, horrible sexual encounters with random people, and it's just, I did not find that enjoyable to read. And apparently she redeems herself in the end, but I just couldn't deal with, like, how low the descent went. Maybe after, like, all the intensity in A Little Life, with, like, all the abuse that the main character goes through, that gets dredged up, I couldn't go there again right now. So maybe I've put it on my abandoned list. I might revisit it at some point, but it's just not right now. And there's nothing wrong with that. And then the book that I am currently reading is, okay, I'll just show you the little thing here. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And I am about halfway through this book. And I'm really enjoying how he's structured the book. Like, he's got it he's talking about specific types of, like, racism, let's see, what's the one that I'm on right now? Let me drop a bookmark and have a look. Go back here. Beginning of the chapter. So like the chapter that I'm on right now is talking about class, and it has these little definitions at the beginning of the chapter, and then he also incorporates his own process of experiencing these things in stories from his own life. And it's really engaging, as well as integrating that with talking about how these things have been defined, and like history about them as well. I'm not describing this correctly. Anyway, I really enjoy his book, and I look forward to, he has another book that's on my reading list that I think it's stamped from the beginning that I am now really looking forward to reading. So yeah, I'm enjoying that one. And I have some of these books that are over in this pile here are some recent, or some, we're actually getting physical books from the library again. My local branch, or my local library, the Edmonton Public Library, has opened many of their branches just so that you can pick up holds. And they have at the moment, all you can do is you can request books and then go pick them up. And they have so many holds on the shelf that they have just like, it's all the shelves are full. Above the shelves are full. They have a whole table that's by a window that is also full of people's holds. So it's good to see that people are making use of that. And so I've been just making like a weekly appointment with myself to go pick up books. And my mom is very excited to have physical books again. We've both been reading ebooks, and we still have lots on our lists, on our digital lists to go through. But it's nice to have some physical books too. So I've got, I think, 4 over there that I will attack at some point. And one of those is a new graphic novel. I'll bring it over. One of them, I'm very excited about this. This is a new graphic novel by one of my favorite comic book artists, Chris Ware. This is Rusty Brown. And yeah, I think he's been working on this book for like over 10 years or something. But I feel like you could say that about any of his books, because like his pages are kind of intense. And you can see there's a lot of pages in there. So there's a lot of work in here. I mean, his style is kind of spare and geometric, but that does not necessarily mean that it is simple to draw. So I'm looking forward to spending some time with that. And I also got, people have been talking about Ursula Le Guin for a while, and I've been like intending to read some of her work. And then finally, Katie Green of the Green Bean podcast was talking about how she loves, her favorite fantasy of all time is the Earthsea series, Chronicles something. So I've got the first book here out of the library. I've actually ordered the same omnibus that she says that she reads and rereads. So I'm gonna get started on this while I wait for that to come. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to, oh, you want to see what else is in my pile? I've got 2 other books. Might as well, since we're here. And we're already over an hour, so what's another few minutes? So this is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. And this is a memoir of the woman who was victimized by Brock Turner? I'm not sure what the guy's name is, but he's the like privileged white guy who was witness to assault her, and then everybody would I suppose people in the media were like, oh, well, but it's going to ruin his entire life. And so this is her side of things, and probably saying, you know, how it's affected her life. And for a long time, she was unnamed. So she wrote this memoir and has claimed her story, I guess is the best way to put it. And then Carrie Fisher, A Life on the Edge. So this is a biography. I think my mom actually got this out, but she, you know, we pick out books for each other. My mom's a librarian. I'm an aspiring librarian. Well, soon to be librarian, I guess. Future librarian. It'll happen one of these days. So, I haven't really looked at this book, but I like Carrie Fisher, and I've read some of Carrie Fisher's books. And yeah, I'd like to, yeah, it'd be interesting to learn some more about her. I mean, she kind of had a crazy life, like the whole, I think she described it in one of her books that, her mom was Debbie Reynolds, and her father, was Eddie Fisher. And, like, when they were married, it was basically the equivalent of Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Or no, Brad Pitt and Jennifer Aniston, I suppose. And then when they broke up, it was kind of like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. And he went to, I think he left her for her mom for Marilyn Monroe. And so being a child of that first marriage, when the second marriage is going on, like, that's wild. That's a wild situation to be in. And, yeah. So, she's had a wild life. And then to become Princess Leia, right? And all that entailed. And then, you know, live a life where people come to meet you at Comic-Con and then tell you about how you were their first female fantasy character. Like, sexual fantasy. Like, that's... Got it. That's kind of insane. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to end on that note. So, yeah, I am not going to make any promises about posting more regularly, because I obviously can't make that promise right now with the way the world is, the way that my life is. Not that my life is so chaotic at the moment, but I can't promise anything. Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for checking things out. And, I hope you enjoy whatever you're crafting these days. Or whatever you're doing besides crafting. I hope, I hope you can find something that you're into and that brings you some sort of pleasure or joy. Yeah, I'm obviously not very eloquent about that, but yeah, thanks for sticking with me if you made it to the end. Like, you get a gold star from me, because I don't always have the attention span. I'm like 2 months behind on all my podcasts and that I subscribe to, and yeah, so thumbs up from me. Thanks.